is a video and audio test of me rambling while I drive. I am a dish installer, and I spend a lot of my day going from house to house, trying to sell them speakers and climb on their roof. Sometimes their TV's busted and I fix it, and sometimes I have to crawl under houses, which is good for the winter because all the snakes are dead. And that's a lot of time to think, especially when I've taken an Adderall and had a Monster. And I'm hoping that the thoughts I have as a result are worth the 10 years they're taking off my life. So one of the thoughts I had recently was how most people don't understand that other people see the world differently than they do. And what I mean is, if you ask somebody what's wrong with somebody else, what you'll usually get back is either, well, I've always, or I think they just need to, or if they would just, so for example, somebody is too high strung, and someone else goes, well, I mean, I've just learned to chill out. I've just learned, not to let things bother me, and I think they just need to take things less seriously. Or if someone is less volatile and less neurotic, the more volatile neurotic people will say, well, they just don't take anything seriously. They need to engage. They're so flippant and dismissive. Well, my idea, and there's scientific evidence and theological evidence to back this up that I could talk more about, is that there is an environmental niche for every temperamental variant. And that's an idea I really picked up from Jordan Peterson. Because if you have someone who's extroverted and emotionally stable, that person might not last very long in the Soviet Union. I'm thinking like in 48, when everybody's being put in gulags and the Stalinist state was at its height. But if you're a neurotic introvert who's slightly paranoid, you're going to do great in the Soviet Union. You might even live to a ripe old age of 60 before your liver explodes. And what people don't understand, I think, a lot of people I encounter don't understand, is that, number one, not everyone's like them. Number two, if everyone was like them, there'd be huge gaps in society. For example, I'm very high in openness, very low in conscientiousness. I'm wired for creative problem solving and communication. If no one was like me, there'd be no art, there'd be no new businesses, there'd be no technological innovation. But if everyone was like me, nothing would ever get done, because I'd rather contemplate a snowflake than do the same thing 50 times. But if no one is jazzed about doing the same thing 50 times, there's no factories, there's no workshops, there's no, society runs on people who are high in conscientiousness and low in openness. Another thing Jordan Peterson talks about is how political leanings can be predicted with pretty high level of accuracy by being familiar with someone's temperament. So if someone's high in openness and high in negative emotion and low in conscientiousness, they tend to vote left. They tend to identify as liberal in the American sense. And if someone's low in openness and high in conscientiousness, So in other words, they're not super interested in ideas or aesthetics, but they are driven by a really strong work ethic and a consistency. They tend to vote right wing. And you need both, because if it's only people like me, you can't sustain things, because innovation is very chaotic, and chaos is unstable. But if everyone is like the nose to the grindstone, put in your 40 years at the same company, then life becomes very drab. And you need only look. My wife and I were in Prague about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, and the city center is artisans and architects who were going for beauty and truth and goodness, like portraying that in the architecture. And as a result, you have Prague Castle, which is this gorgeous cathedral. You have a beautiful downtown, old town, Wenceslaus Square, Carl's Bridge, and then you have, like, in stark contrast, the communist bits. There's the TV tower, which is rated as the third most ugly building in the world. There's just the concrete Lego blocks that people were herded into when they weren't at the factory. And you just see, this is open, creative people doing architecture, and this is drab, shabby bureaucracy, cutting off the tallest poppy type society, building things. You just look at them side by side and you pick which one you want to live in. So you need both, because to build a building, you need all the parts to be there on time. You need it to be built up to code. You need the math behind the engineering plans to be sound, so that load-bearing walls bear the right loads and everything. So you need conscientious, orderly people. But for the building to be beautiful, you need creative people. And so, in a lot of ways, getting things done in a way that is both true and beautiful involves a marriage of those two kinds of people, involves a close working together of those two kinds of people. And I read a quote from Gallup, the Strengths Finder, Clifton's. Anyway, if you Google Strengths Finder 2.0, it's this concept, and the concept behind that is middle management becomes well-rounded, but executives focus on and develop and play up their strengths and delegate their weaknesses. So, and there's the TV show Rome from HBO from like 10 years ago. There's this line where the young Octavian is learning swordsmanship, and his tutor is like, "Oh, don't be so hard on yourself, young Dominus. You'll get it yet." He says, no matter how hard I try at this, I'll never be more than a middling swordsman. And the graveyards are full of middling swordsmen. So he knew that sword skill was not where all his points were. He knew that it was more charm and leadership and political cunning. So he played that up, and then he delegated the swordsmanship to people who that was their primary strength. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, be like a Roman emperor. That makes sense, right? I am wearing red.